Dear friends, today we have a remarkable guest in our club. A distinguished scientist, an exceptional artist, a brilliant teacher, a writer, and a person who has changed the perception of the past, and therefore the present and future, for tens of thousands of people, not only in our country but around the world. I am honored to introduce academician Anatoly Fomenko. Good afternoon, Anatoly Timofeyevich.
Good afternoon, Igor Igorovich. Before we begin, I want to say that it is a great honor for me to participate in this conversation. We have a wonderful host, a famous wrestler, a multi-time world champion, and a well-known author of books. You wrote the remarkable books, A Wrestler on Wrestling, about the history of wrestling, and Games Pleasing to the Gods, about the history of the Olympic Games. This is a very relevant and important topic today. So, I'm very glad to be here with you, Igor Igorovich. Thank you for the invitation.
Anatoly Timofeyevich, thank you for your kind introduction. I thought for a long time about how to begin, and I decided that, especially in talking with you, it would be best to proceed in chronological order. As I understand it, the first conscious talent that manifested in you was painting. From what I gather, you later felt constrained by the real world and, at a more mature age, you began to depict things that are essentially impossible to draw, projecting multidimensional figures onto a two-dimensional surface. It's hard enough to draw a three-dimensional figure in projection, but you started to draw a world that perhaps only a few can fully comprehend, some kind of multidimensional geometric figures, right?
Yes, that started during my time at the university. I'm a geometer, and at our university, I took wonderful courses in geometry and topology. Together with the brilliant mathematician Dmitry Fuchs, we came up with the idea to write a book on mathematics, which we did. At that time, it was a new, still developing and fashionable topic, and the subject was geometric deformations of figures and their properties. The idea came up to create illustrations for this book, which I did. I drew informal sketches that showed how complex theorems, constructions, and deformations are structured. When the book came out, these illustrations garnered a lot of interest. They played a significant role in promoting topology and geometry at that time. It was my first experience of using ink and pencil to visually represent very complex subjects and non-trivial ideas in topology, geometry, mathematics, physics, and their applications, such as hydrodynamics. They were like photographs of the scientific world as seen through the eyes of mathematicians. My first works of painting were connected with mathematics, but later I felt the urge to go beyond mathematics and reflect mythology, associations, and inner thoughts about how our world is arranged, the world we live in. This led to many works that were outside the boundaries of mathematics. I've never belonged to any associations or considered myself part of any movement. I was very proud of an exhibition that was held at the Tretiakov Gallery. It was in the hyper-realism style of the 1960s, a very turbulent time.
By the way, you were the illustrator for the first Soviet edition of The Master and Margarita, right?
That's correct. At that time, the book was being prepared for print for the first time, and everyone was eagerly waiting for it. There was a lot of buzz around it, and the idea of providing it with illustrations came up. A competition for artists was announced in Moscow. I was invited to participate, even though I wasn't a member of the Moscow branch of the Union of Russian Artists, but my work was well known. I created about 60 works for The Master and Margarita. However, all sorts of intrigues then started surrounding the publication. In the end, the first edition of Bulgakov's famous novel The Master and Margarita was published without any illustrations, which was a great pity, but my works remained. Later, they were displayed at exhibitions. I had around 100 exhibitions during those years. I'm very happy that, after many years, our main central publishing house, AST, released Bulgakov's book with my illustrations.
Your efforts were not in vain.
I'm very satisfied and proud to have made some contribution to a remarkable series of illustrations. Many artists have drawn on this theme. I'm one of them, and I'm very happy about that.
Naturally, I've seen those drawings. They are quite non-traditional, let's say, with double or even triple meanings. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's clear that the work itself left a strong impression on you, didn't it?
That's true. I remember when we first read the novel. We were still students, graduate students at Moscow State University, and it shocked us. I had known about the novel since high school, thanks to my literature teacher, but at that time, we didn't have the opportunity to read it. The novel deeply affected me with its literary brilliance and its deep exploration of old legends and myths. So, the illustrations weren't just simple pictures. They reflected my own perception and that of my fellow students at the time. It's an outstanding work. In my opinion, it's uniquely Russian, genius, and reflects a great deal of the psychology of our era, our generation, and the generations before us.
Yes, that's evident. You were around 45 years old, give or take. You were the youngest academician in the Soviet Union. You had fascinating subjects to study. People strive their whole lives for such achievements. It was the perfect time to rest on your laurels and enjoy your beloved, orderly world. And yet, at that moment, you suddenly delved into a different field, threw down the gauntlet to the established world of peaceful border sciences, particularly history. You began developing the new chronology, publishing articles, then books, and promoting the idea. Was the reaction that followed something you expected? Did you anticipate it, or were you surprised by the sharp negative responses?
Of course, the reaction was unexpected. I hadn't really thought about it. I started working on this subject before I became an academician, when I was still a PhD and professor of mathematics. I came to this subject through astronomy. I was studying problems of celestial mechanics, specifically the equations of the moon's motion. There's an important and interesting issue, the moon's acceleration. Before me, there was remarkable work by the outstanding astrophysicist Robert Newton. He discovered a certain effect in the moon's behavior, a leap in its acceleration that couldn't be explained by Newton's law of gravitation. This generated significant interest in the scientific community. A conference was convened to explain this leap in the moon's behavior. No explanation was found, leaving an unresolved scientific, purely mathematical, physical, and astronomical question. What was happening with the moon in the past? According to this model, there was a leap in acceleration in the past. At that time, I noticed that Newton's calculations of the moon's behavior were based on the dates of old eclipses, which he, of course, took from chronology tables. I had heard of an alternative version of eclipse dates proposed by our prominent scientist, honorary academician of our Academy of Sciences, Nikolai Morozov. He believed that there were some errors in the dating of ancient eclipses and that they needed correction. He proposed new dates. I took Morozov's tables, substituted the data into Newton's equations, made calculations, and got the result that there were no leaps. Consequently, the suspicion arose that the entire problem might stem from incorrect eclipse dates. This is how my interest in new chronology began.
You joyfully shared this with historians, expecting heartfelt thanks, but instead received denunciations, complaints, and other unpleasant consequences.
It turned out that the subject was very interesting. In fact, it's mathematical, since dating is a matter of applied mathematics. It's about calendar calculations, how events were dated in the past, how calendars were converted, how astronomical clocks behave, the so-called horoscopes depicted on ancient monuments, which allow for dating. This isn't really history, it's applied mathematics, and good one, but not simple at that. That's why my colleagues and I are essentially not dealing with history but with applied mathematics, an important application of mathematics to chronology. The reaction was somewhat unexpected for us, but entirely understandable and, I'd say, natural. Any science must be conservative.
People have agreed on everything, they're comfortable, they've created their world, and then suddenly, like a bolt from the blue, you appear and disrupt their peace.
This has happened in science before. It's not the first time. We're well aware of similar events in physics and mathematics. When Lobachevskian geometry replaced Euclidean geometry, there was a negative reaction among mathematicians as well.
Incidentally, Lobachevsky died unrecognized.
Yes, unfortunately, he suffered greatly.
Only after his death did people realize what a genius had lived among them.
He was ostracized, exiled, persecuted, and he died in poverty. It was a very sad story in the history of mathematics. There is a similar example in the history of physics. It's the Einstein-Minkowski-Hilbert theory, which didn't replace Galileo's physics but runs parallel to it. There was a lot of noise and much rejection of this new theory at first. Then things settled down, and it turned out to be a reasonable viewpoint. But mathematics and physics are simpler than history. That's why revolutions happened earlier in those fields. First in mathematics, because mathematics is simpler than physics, then in physics, and finally in history. Physics is simpler than history. In history, much depends on accumulated experience. You need to have a large volume of knowledge. This science is very complex. Therefore, paradigm shift happens later, but seemingly inevitably.
I understand that there were some pretty tense moments, criticisms. After all, you have a department, a name, achievements, and then people start criticizing and slandering you. That must have been unpleasant. And there were threats too, I gather. Did you ever feel like giving up, quitting, and returning to a field where you were more secure? Did such a fleeting thought ever cross your mind?
No, I don't think so, because the problem turned out to be very interesting. For a scientist, the most important thing in life is to find a good problem and try to make some progress in it. It's a great joy when something works out. So, I'm happy that I was able to encounter such a remarkable subject, such a problem in my life, and that I was able to at least partially solve it. Therefore, I didn't want to step aside. But of course, there were a lot of unpleasant situations for me, my colleagues, and my wife, Tatiana Nikolaevna. Our work caused a very strong reaction in society, both positive and negative. People wrote denunciations against us, sent letters. In the past, such denunciations went to the Central Committee of the Communist Party. In recent years, they write to the President, to the Investigative Committee, to the Federal Security Service. For example, someone shot through the window of our apartment, others shattered windows.
In general, it's the normal life of a scientist.
The normal life of a scientist who has touched on a subject that really affects and excites many people.
Do you agree that the new chronology has perhaps gone beyond a scientific project and become a certain social phenomenon that has indeed stirred many minds? I know for a fact that your books can be found both in a war zone trench and on a government official's shelf. So, it has truly become something more than just a scientific direction. Does that please you, satisfy you, or is the situation indifferent to you?
Of course not. At first, when we got involved in this matter, we did not expect that the issue would go so far beyond the bounds of science. But it did, and it's clear why. In fact, although we don't fully realize it today, chronology underpins many fundamental things. For example, chronology forms the basis of ideas about the history of states, about who lived in a particular territory and when. This is linked to modern politics. Today, many argue over territories. Give us this land. We lived here before you, according to chronology. So, unfortunately, chronology turned out to be connected to politics. We didn't intend for this, but it happened. Therefore, many consequences of chronology, which were not made by us, have provoked irritation, surprise, and attempts to understand. Many views change when you change the dates. One of my books is even titled, "Changing Dates Changes Everything." Chronology is the backbone that we don't even see today, that we don't realize. Changing dates alters much in the history of art, the military, politics, and states. Replacing dates with different ones is not easy, and the dates are changed significantly. This is why the issue affects people far removed from science, history, and certainly from mathematics or date calculation.
Since we've touched on this topic, one of the cornerstone conclusions of the new chronology is that there once existed a vast empire that encompassed almost the entire inhabited world, which then fragmented. The largest fragment is modern Russia. Do you think Russian statehood is possible without the imperial idea? Can Russia exist without it? Many people are surprised by Russia's constant drive to overcome challenges. To be the first in space, first here, first there, sometimes even at the expense of the people's well-being at certain points in history. We dig canals, live in barracks, build cosmodromes in the desert, but are always striving and doing something. Do you think it's possible for Russia to develop differently? Or is it our fate to eternally attempt to restore its imperial status?
It is our fate, our cross, our star. The new chronology unexpectedly led to a consequence we hadn't anticipated. It turned out that many of the great empires we know from textbooks, such as the Roman Empire, the Great Caliphate, the Chinese Empire, the Empire of Charles V, are reflections of one empire that, according to our hypothesis, existed in Eurasia and partially in America from the 14th to the early 17th centuries. In history textbooks, it doesn't surprise people that the Empire of Charles V was considered global. The empire on which the sun never set was its famous slogan in those years. The sun rises in the east, sets in the ocean, and constantly illuminates the empire. It turned out, according to our hypothesis, that this was the empire of the 14th–17th centuries. We tentatively call it the Great Horde Empire, which is also the Russian Empire. The capital at that time was first in Istanbul, then in Moscow. Hence, the long-standing alliance between the Ottoman Empire, today Turkey, and Russia Horde. The empire's capital was likely here, in the center, and from here stems Russia's imperial self-awareness, as a territory, a people, a culture, a civilization. Thus, the fact that today we see various manifestations of imperial memories, aspirations, and accomplishments should be expected.
It's genetically ingrained.
It's in the genetics, the feeling of the people living in this territory. In this country, across a vast area, there was, and is, one language. There is no other territory like this. It's a memory of the empire, where one language served an enormous territory.
Anatoly Timofeyevich, what other scientific fields interest you? I don't know, perhaps genetics or astronomy. Do you follow developments in related sciences or just read some digests, scientific articles? What subjects concern you?
Of course, I want to learn more. Genetics is very fascinating. I try to follow it, especially since genetics is related to dating issues. Recently, there has been a lot of discussion about the possibilities of dating remains through genetic material. This contributes a lot to chronology and the development of culture around the world. Astronomy is also very interesting, especially since my work in chronology originated from astronomy. But this interest is primarily linked either to applications in chronology or purely academic interest, since I don't have the opportunity to professionally engage in genetic research, though it would be very interesting.
Anatoly Timofeyevich, I didn't even ask half the questions I wanted to ask. Moreover, a dozen new ones came to mind during our conversation. It was a fascinating discussion. We're bound to continue it. Thank you for coming and being with us. Please visit our philosophical club again. Many thanks.
Thank you as well. I'm very grateful for the questions. They were very well thought out and create a whole world in the interlocutor's mind. You want to tell everything, but there's not enough time. Yet the picture that emerged thanks to the questions is very memorable. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you.